Hi, welcome to Kirkland Lawrence's Eportfolio reflection video. I start this reflection video by saying, wow, I made it. My guiding philosophy is what man has done, man can do. And it certainly stands tall at this time because when I remember where I am coming from and where I have reached in the field of educational technology, I know I have much to be thankful for. Let me take this opportunity for thanking the following persons. God Almighty for guiding me through the process. My family for their continued support, especially my wife, Audrey. My instructors and peers for their thoughtful and discerning feedback, which contributed significantly to the high standard of my work. Last but not least, Mrs. Stephanie Belcher for her role as editor, who ensured that all my assignments were error-free and submitted to the highest standard. Why did I start the EdTech journey? I started the EdTech journey when I realized that my traditional chalk and talk method of delivering instruction was not reaching the students, and at the same time it was becoming obsolete. At that time, I decided to pursue a master's degree in educational technology to equip myself with the requisite skills and knowledge needed to compete in this technological arena. At that time, I gave serious consideration to the programs offered by several universities and decided that the program of studies offered at Boise State University coincided exactly with my professional needs at that time, hence my arrival at Boise State University. After completed 5 core courses and 5 electives, it was now time for me to compile an e-portfolio to demonstrate my mastery in the field of educational technology. I hereby demonstrate this mastery by highlighting a few of my accomplishments. EdTech 502, Internet for Educators, is definitely my favorite course. I enjoyed every moment of this course because I am very creative by nature, and at the same time I am a keen visual and kinesthetic learner, so I take the opportunity to do numerous things in Dreamweaver while at the same time taking advantage of exploring the Fireworks software where I created some stunning graphics. I can remember when I had to stay up late at nights to complete assignments and to practice both software. The EdTech 502 course laid the foundation on which I built all other course websites within the EdTech program. My first assignment was to create a plain HTML page using the Dreamweaver authoring software. It was really plain in appearance with no form of colors or anything appealing to look at. But by the time I learned about cascading style sheet CSS codes, the page was transformed and became more acceptable as it included color, A tags, and hyperlinks. The Non-Designer webbook by Williams and Tollett taught me how to appreciate web designing and saw me spending a vast amount of time practicing how to master the Dreamweaver CSS5 software suite and thus optimizing my web pages. I developed the requisite skills to create any web page from scratch by using both HTML and CSS codes to format and personalize the page according to my likeness. I appreciate the fact that I can use divs to position my headings and images, padding to move things away from the margins, and color from the swatch to color my pages or text according to what is required during the design stage at that time. One of the main challenges I faced while using HTML and CSS codes was to create pages which meet accessibility needs. The W3C XHTML 1.0 transition and the W3C CSS validation tests are conducted to determine the extent to which these sites are meeting accessibility needs. Often, if the site fails the test, the process of locating the problems and to do the necessary changes to correct them is quite tedious and painstaking. However, through constant practice over time, I developed the ability to solve these problems. At the same time, the EdTech site has inspired me to create a website of my own. The site is in its infancy stage and can be viewed at www.lawrencetechsite.com. I plan to use this site to host several projects done in this EdTech program, since after a certain time I will no longer have access to the EdTech 2 server, and I would like to make reference to some of my projects from time to time. In the EdTech 522 course, Online Teaching for Adult Learners, I created an online assignment in Adobe Connect on how to use Dropbox in the school system. Dropbox is essentially a software that stores files in the cloud. While preparing for the execution of the Dropbox presentation, I discovered that Adobe Connect software is not user-friendly for novice users. Although I watched several videos and tutorials before I began to use it, I was not able to do a one-shot recording. I actually did about 7 or 8 recordings before acquiring a satisfactory one. Each time I tried to select the appropriate settings, there was something that happening before time. For example, screen sharing, the mic, or recording would take place before I was ready to start the meeting. Honestly, setting up Dropbox meeting was very cumbersome, mainly because I was unfamiliar with the software and I was uncertain which action I should perform first in order to have a successful recording of the meeting. Since that first attempt, I eventually became tremendously adept in the use of Adobe Connect software, and I was very instrumental in helping my classmate to set up a synchronous meeting in EdTech 523 on copyright and plagiarism.
Our strategy of expedition as we go through and practice some copyright.
Meanwhile, as a strategy to reduce paper use in the education system, I often encourage my students to use Dropbox as a medium to upload assignments, while at the same time I used it as a convenient way of sharing content with students in an attempt to minimize the use of photocopied notes in the classroom. This facilitates collaboration among group members and I can track students' progress. I am happy to announce the overwhelming positive responses I am receiving from my colleagues as they too started to use Dropbox in their respective departments after I introduced it to them at a personal development workshop held earlier this year. At my school, I continued to be the trendsetter in the use of technology by integrating technology in almost all of my classes. I am one of the guinea pigs for the EdTech 506 Graphic Design for Learning course. It used to be called Instructional Message Design prior to my enrollment during fall 2011. Nonetheless, the content remained the same. I learned how to create several graphics using the Fireworks authoring tool in conjunction with the CARP principle, integration principle, figure and ground principle, among others. I used the finished product of each assignment to develop a complete electrical engineering web-based lesson for my students. It was very time-consuming to present a rational paper to justify why I designed each graphic. In addition, I also have to develop a lesson plan to support each lesson presented on the site. The information in each lesson was chunked in manageable proportion to reduce cognitive load and clearly communicate the message to learners with lots of white space, in keeping with Linda Lohr, 2008. This site is currently being visited by my students when I am teaching topics such as types of diagrams, elements of a circuit, and electric motor controls. In the instructional design plan for the EdTech 503 project, I spent a considerable amount of time looking at learners' characteristics during the developmental stages. By studying the abilities, attitudes, and preferences of those students for whom the Microsoft PowerPoint presentation assignment was being created, I gained a deep understanding of the myriad influences that can develop as a result of individual learners' traits and characteristics. Being cognizant of front-end analysis, I was able to determine the appropriate instructional strategies, since I have to consider each student in order to design instruction that meets the needs of individuals, each with varying abilities and personality traits. In recent times, this has become the norm for me when developing instructions for my students. No longer do I develop my lesson in an haphazard manner as I did in the past. I use the ADDIE model to guide my lesson development, since it is reiterative in design. That means I can enter any of the stage of the design process to make changes without affecting the overall design of instruction. I take one notion from the EdTech course, that is, instructional technology is directly linked to educational technology, where instructional technology can be seen as the vehicle for transporting instruction, while educational technology is the medium or avenue through which instruction is disseminated to students. That's a sneak peek at some of my achievements at Boise State University. I conclude by saying, when I began the EdTech journey, I virtually knew nothing about HTML codes, CSS codes, the APA manual, the use of Web 2.0 tools, or even theories behind educational technology. Now I know what works and why, and I am able to apply what I learned into the classroom amid limitation. Finally, I take this opportunity to state once again how very much I enjoyed the EdTech program. It was stimulating, valuable, and extremely informative. A real eye-opener. Thank you all for watching.